The Disrupt Education vlog can be found on YouTube. To hear it in podcast form, search Disrupt Education on any of the following podcast platforms: Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Breaker, Castbox, Overcast, Radio Public, Pocket Cast, Spotify, or Stitcher. Welcome to this episode of Disrupt Education. I'm Peter Hostrasser. I have a great guest here, traveling from New York, soon to be in Texas, I believe, Boruch DuBrow. I got that right?
You got it. You nailed it.
Awesome. As close as I can get. But thank you so much for being here, man. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. So as you said, my name is Boruch DuBrow. I am an ordained rabbi. I actually grew up out in the Midwest in St. Louis, Missouri. Not too far from where you are. I actually have a story growing up. We once drove 5 hours from St. Louis to Chicago to get a kosher hamburger because there was nothing in St. Louis. So I'm very well acquainted with Chicago. I moved to California when I was about 12, and since then, I spent a year in Hawaii as an assistant rabbi, part of the Chabad Hasidic group of Orthodox Jews. We're the ones known as the dancing rabbis. We're always happy in dancing. I currently live out in Brooklyn in Crown Heights, New York, something I swore I would never do, but you got to be careful with what you say. And I am an educator, something else I swore I would never do. So I'm on a great track record already. But the truth is, after over 10 years of being an educator, I absolutely love it. And now I'm just glad to have the opportunity to sit down and have this chat with you and see where this goes.
Oh, I appreciate it. Yeah, that's we're known for a lot of good food here in Chicago, so I'm glad that's a long trip for that. But let's jump in then to, from traveling around, you must have had an interesting educational path. Kind of wanted to, share that. What is that like with, your culture, your religion, and even traveling around? What does that look like for you, or did that look like for you?
Sure. So anything I say is really going to be, I don't want it to be taken as a blanket statement for Judaism or Orthodoxy or Chabad Hasidism as a whole. It really was kind of like my story, and there's elements of it that obviously are shared with the culture. But I grew up in, as I mentioned before, in St. Louis, Missouri, there's not a big Hasidic presence there. As a matter of fact, at the time, it was pretty much myself and 3 other families. It was a more modern Orthodox community. And I absolutely love the community. I mean, I credit them for so much of who I am today. So schooling was very interesting because in many ways I was an outcast. I was the only Hasidic Orthodox Jew in a religious and Orthodox Jewish school, but we were more stringent in many ways. And socially, things were just a little bit different. Academically as well. I mean, I don't know if special ed was even really a thing back then, but if special ed was a thing, I'm sure I probably would have been in a special ed class. As it was, I have very clear memories of Mora Judy. We call all of our female teachers, they're Mora, and a male teacher is a Rebbe or a rabbi. So Mora Judy was, I believe, in first grade. I clearly remember her pulling me out of classes and doing extracurricular learning. And I only found out recently that that wasn't actually her job. Like, she was a full-on teacher. And during her breaks, she would pull out students who were struggling and give of her own time to teach them. So that was, when I start thinking about my education and what I went through, that was one of the first fondest memories I have. But it was a really great education, especially then. There was a very heavy focus on our character and the way we treated each other, the way we treated our teachers, the way we treated the world and the people around us. And that's something that really stuck with me a lot. And, I think Napoleon Hill says that within every adversity lies a seed to a greater outcome. You can say it a lot better than that, but essentially that for every negative, there's something that's a lot more positive. And looking at it now, I see that having gone through that and having kind of been this outsider within the community, it gave me an ability and a chance to learn and open my mind to another community, even though we're all Jewish and we're all Orthodox Jewish, but certain customs were different. So seeing that now, it's something that's definitely helped. And then as the years went on, my family moved back to California because that's where they were originally from. And I was enrolled in a mainstream Chabad Hasidic school, and where once again I was once again the outcast because I had spent the first 12 years of my life in a completely different school. So I said certain words in Hebrew a little bit differently. I came in with different things that the students weren't used to seeing as far as behavior, not necessarily bad behavior, just different things were important to me. And there was a very heavy influence on, academic, but also the impact that we have on the world. So I got to take what I learned from the modern Orthodox community in St. Louis and combine it with what I was now learning from the community that I officially belong to in California, and utilize both of them to really just start making the world a better place. And, one of the things we have in Chabad ideology is this idea of what we call a mashpia, and in Hebrew that's a term, and it means like a mentor, essentially a guide, somebody who's there to help you as you go through your life's journey. And that was something I brought with me wherever I went. And that was something that I really started to see a lot in my teachers, that I started to differentiate between teachers and mentors and guides, or teachers and educators. I think everybody remembers their worst teacher, but everybody also has maybe those 2 or 3 teachers that were like absolutely life-changing. So I started to pick up on that. And those are the ones who, they weren't there for the academics. They were really there for the character development, for taking that spark inside and igniting it and turning, fanning the flames to become something bigger and better. I could go on and on and on about stories of my education, but the principal in that transitional year from going from the modern Orthodox school to the Chabad school, the principal, it was absolutely game changing for me.
Yeah.
And then, I went through the high school, the mainstream high school within the Chabad Hasidic community, which is, once again, very heavily academic based, and it's based on a lot of the Jewish scripture and a lot of the Jewish laws. And essentially what it does is it trains you to become a rabbi. Again, like I said, I am a rabbi. And especially with our approach to the rabbinical title, it's not just being a pulpit rabbi. It's we go out into the middle of nowhere and we reignite the Jewish community there. And so that requires certain skills and abilities and certain knowledge. And it's really, you're going out on your own and you have to figure things out as you go along. So that's what they really teach us to do. I then spent a year in Hawaii working for a rabbi out there as an assistant rabbi. And I spent a couple more years working for other various rabbis, all along building this idea of what is a quality education? What is it really about? How do we impact people's lives? And then to where I am today, where I've been teaching for over 10 years and almost entirely in special ed schools. And it's always been about, again, focusing on the child or the individual and who they are as an entity and as a unique being, as opposed to a mass-produced, factory-made child who's gonna, go to work and get a 9-to-5 job and just go through nothing wrong with a 9-to-5 job, but it's a certain programming. Whereas, the approach that was given to me, thank God, and the approach I now try to take is, who is this individual who is this child as an individual, and what is their uniqueness, and what is it that we're trying to bring out?
With that path, understanding mentors and the differentiation of educators or teachers and mentors, and obviously that first interaction where you were outside of a class, somehow you realize that this person actually wasn't, that wasn't their job. They were going above and beyond. And at our beginning of our conversation, you're like, I didn't want to become an educator or teacher, and now you are. How did that come into play, and what are some of the things that you are adding to where you are right now in the last 10 years in the classroom? Because we had some previous conversation about some interesting things that you're doing.
Right. So it's funny because, as you mentioned, I swore I would never be an educator. I swore I would never be a teacher. I also swore I would never marry somebody from Brooklyn. I would never live in Brooklyn. And Well, all of those things have happened. So it really happened because I always knew education was important. I believed heavily in it. I just felt that the education that I was getting wasn't right. So I pursued education. So when I was getting ready to get married, I spent a year and a half trying to understand, what is marriage about? What are relationships about? What does it take to have a successful marriage? Because you hear about people who, they get divorced, and okay, we don't always know what's going on. And sometimes, unfortunately, divorce is necessary. But I wanted to make sure that going into marriage, I was doing everything I could to make sure I was prepared for it, so that it would be, not only would it last, but it would be happy and healthy. So I pursued that education. And then I did get married, thank God. And I realized, well, now that I'm married, I need to support my family. So living in Crown Heights, there's an abundance of jobs working in schools here as something called a paraprofessional. And it's essentially a shadow. Like, that's what people in other areas, they call it a shadow, where I was assigned one boy, and it was my job to shadow this boy. And with this boy in particular, I was hired to make sure he didn't get into fistfights. And that's how I started off, because it paid the bills and it was a job. Now, again, me being me and having received the education that I received, I saw that this boy wasn't going to make it through the year just not getting in fights. Like, there was something missing. So I started working with him, and in conjunction with his therapists and his service providers and his teachers, we started developing him as the character, the characteristics. So at first it was hard, and there were a lot of bruises and scratches on my part because I still had to do that physical work. But it was always after that, the physical work of restraining him was done. Well, we need to sit down and talk about this, because clearly there's something still on your mind. Like, when a kid, is having a tantrum, or he's throwing a fit, or he's getting physical, it's because there's something he's trying to say, or she's trying to say, something they need to express. So if we just stop them from expressing it, it doesn't solve the problem. It just builds up. So what we started doing with him was really, speaking to him and giving him the perspective of, it's okay to feel, and it's important to feel. But you have to express your feelings in the proper way. So much so that by the end of the year, thank God, he was at a place where, a situation that normally would have been disastrous for him, he was able to communicate through it. And that was definitely not solely me. Like, it was the teamwork of everybody involved. From there, I was hired as a first grade English teacher. At the same school, they needed somebody to take the place of the first grade English teacher, so I stepped in there. Then I did 7th and 8th grade in the afternoons, teaching again math and reading. And again, it was always this is going to pay the bills, and that's the only reason behind it. But it was never just that. It was always, well, these kids need to be understood. They want to be understood. They're begging to be understood. So that's what I would give them. My students know, and sometimes I take advantage of it, that, if there's a chance to teach a life lesson or have a teachable moment, I'm going straight for that. Like, forget the math lesson. I don't care what X equals. We're talking life. And, that's what it became. And then I finally took on my first full-time teaching position at another school after having worked at their day camp. And that was a huge leap for me. I was not confident at all in my ability, but thank God they believed in it. And I worked there for a number of years, where once again, I'm dealing with students who were coming from broken homes. They were culturally, it was a thing. And just in their situation, it was a lot of broken families. They didn't really have parental support or parental guidance. And it was also very academically charged. Like, you have to perform well, you have to do well, otherwise you're a failure. And so helping them to understand, the grades are important, yes, but how you get those grades is even more important. If you're going to get them and you're going to be stressed about it, was it worth it? But if you can approach it and do a good job and enjoy having done it, or at least knowing that you gave it your all, that was more important. These are the lessons that I always tried to impart them with. And now I actually switched the beginning of the school year to a new school that's entirely a special ed school here in Brooklyn for the Chabad Hasidic community. And I'm dealing with boys who are all over the spectrum, autism and various behavioral challenges and learning disabilities from all extremes. And it boils down to the same thing. We have that behavior plan of, if he says this is the reaction, or this is the consequence, or this is how we deal with it. But at the end of the day, it's not enough to just stop that behavior. He needs to understand why that behavior is not okay. I had a boy today one boy was giving out flashlights. It was really sweet. He brought 18 flashlights to give out to all the students. It was really nice. But one of the boys didn't like the one that he got, so he threw it in the garbage. And okay, well, that's not an appropriate response. And I talked to him, and it escalated. He doesn't like being told he did something wrong, and I wasn't telling him he did something wrong, but that he felt like it. So when time passed, we revisited the issue, and then he made a threat towards me. This is one of his things, is he threatens his teachers. And then I gave him a cool down period. We went through the process of he has to reset, and he knows what he has to do. And then we talked about it. And at the end of the day, he was able to get what he wanted by communicating what it was that he wanted. So throughout education, that's just been my approach has always been, this child just needs to be understood. And what are they trying to say? And what are the unique talents? This same boy, the one who does all the threatening, is an incredible artist. So I would prefer him draw me a picture of what we learned than fill out the worksheet. Because at the end of the day, the worksheet's not going to do him much good. Forget a year from now, 2 days from now. Like, who cares?
Right.
But if we encourage that ability within him, who knows what he can then turn around and go and do with it. As far as what I'm trying to do with education, I'm just trying to bring it back to that idea of, understanding the student. It needs to be student-centered. And there's so many different ways that education can be student-centered, whether it's pod-based learning, where they're learning in groups of 4, or whether it's there on their iPads. That's not me. I can utilize technology. I can utilize those methodologies. My thing is the relationship. As with anything, with business, with life, with marriage, with family, relationship always has to come first. The teachers need to establish strong, healthy relationships with their students. And the administration needs to establish strong, healthy relationships with their staff and their teachers. And I think when we remember that and we focus on that, we're not only setting ourselves up for success, we're setting our students up for success, and we avoid a lot of the challenges and the problems that we see in school today and in the world. It's things are just heavily relationship based.
Right.
So trying to bring that idea back into school, I think it's something that is missing a lot. I speak to a lot of educators, and I'm related to a lot of educators who have multiple degrees. I don't have any degrees. I have the degree of hard knock. I've gone through life. I've experienced it. I spent over 10 years in the trenches, blood, sweat, and tears, literally and figuratively. And I think a lot of the degree programs forget to talk about the genuine relationship. And it's so important.
Right.
Because then you can, when you have a relationship with a student, or even a staff member, you can not force them, but you can push them beyond what they believe are their limitations. I have it with I had a student today. He doesn't like doing the work at all. He absolutely hates doing work. So I'm not going to expect him to do the 20, writing the letter 20 times. It's just not for him to do. My expectation for him is 5. For him to even do 1 is a huge deal. But it's because we have a relationship. And it's not, do it for me. It's we have this relationship. So he understands that there are times when I'm going to let him off and times when I'm going to push him forward. And at the end of it, he didn't do it for me. He did it because it was the right thing to do. He needed to do it. But now he has this massive reward of, wow, I was actually able to do it. And he came over to me so excited because he didn't do 5. He did 6. I'm like, wow, that's incredible. Most people are like, you did 6, you're supposed to do 20. No, but the point is, what is this child? Who are they becoming? And then we can use methodologies and tools and technology, but the foundation is the principle. At least that's right. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to kind of piggyback on a LinkedIn. I think you put it out today about linear versus cyclical, and I saw that, and that's very interesting because I feel like in education, right, we peg somebody here, and just like this young student you were saying, the linear model is 0 to 20 times you're writing the letter. What you're living, what you believe is, well, let's get to 5 and let's go around in a cycle and then go, guess what? We got to 6. That's good. And that's so much different than the lineal kind of, well, you didn't get there, so everything's off,
Right.
Where do you see this going forward with you? How do you figure, now you're moving, you're going to Texas, and But what comes up next with you? How are you going to take these things, or what is your big hairy goal of taking these things and making, where do we go next with this? Because what you're doing is so needed, so needed. It is the humanistic approach. Some people will label it social emotional learning or the humanistic. You're right. We can't do that. So where do you see this going, not only with education, but with your journey as well?
So this year, 2020, as horrible as it was for many people, and not to downplay that, this was actually absolutely amazing for me because it gave me the opportunity to really put things into motion. And I think for the world at large, it was a huge awakening, and especially within education. And I hope people take advantage of that. People say, I can't wait for things to go back to normal. No, like, I don't want things to go back to normal. Certain aspects of normalcy, yes, like we should get back to certain aspects. Education should not go back to what is normal. Like, maybe that works for some people. Great. So for those people, let's keep it that way. But because we were so withdrawn from each other, because we had to, socially distance, I think that shows the importance of having to build that relationship. So there's no question that education moving forward has to be more focused on relationships, and more relationship centered. And I think whether via distance like this or in person, as far as where I'm going and, where I see education going, I've always approached education from the standpoint that there's no such thing, no paper on the wall is going to give me my credentials. Like, as far as you're concerned, this paper back here is my credentials. It's not. It's actually one of my latest brainstorming sessions.
All right.
You wouldn't know. I mean, we're on a Zoom and you're seeing it, right? So no paper on the wall is really going to give me the experience that I need or the knowledge that I need. Again, not to downplay it, because I speak to people who have papers on the wall because I know that they have certain knowledge that I don't. My approach has always been getting the experience and climbing the ladder, so to speak. So that's why when I started teaching, I started as a tutor, and then I worked as a para, then a part-time teacher, then a full-time teacher, then now I do some consulting for leadership and principals. That is my goal. My goal is the next position I get to, in some form or another, have a leadership type role within a school, whether it's assistant principal or lead consultant, or, honestly, my dream job title would be Director of Professional and Parental Development, because I think that having the parents involved, having the community involved in the school is so extremely important. It can't be family life and then school life, because if they're not connected, something's missing. Like, that's kind of been my approach for many years with my son's schooling, and I'm realizing now, okay, that's just not going to work. So I've been getting a lot more involved now because I need to be a part of this. Like, I am a part of 100% a part of his education. Torah, the Jewish Bible, Torah, there's a law that says that the father is responsible for the child's education. If the father cannot provide the education, then he's responsible for hiring somebody who can. So typically we send our kids to school and we take care of it, but that's not nearly enough. So I've gone full on experiential. So my next goal is to get a leadership type role, because at the end of the day, one of my big dreams is to help open a school that is in line with what I feel are the proper methodologies and the proper values that education should be providing our students with. And again, academics is important. I'm going to hire somebody else to take care of academics, because I get it's important. And the Texas trip we actually just went on to scout out some of the schools was very eye-opening in that way. But I've got my thing, and I'm going to hire people who can do better than me in other areas.
Right.
But my goal is to open a school and then to take that educational platform online. So that's my personal journey where I'm aiming. And again, education as a whole, it really, Simon Sinek, amazing speaker, amazing author. He's got this concept, start with why, the why, the what, and the how. I think when you apply that to education, it's, well, why are we educating our kids? What is the why behind the education? The what and the how are interchangeable. Like, that is not as important. So you can convey learning character through a Zoom class. You can convey it through an app. You can convey it through an online course. But the question is, what are you trying to convey? So I think when we focus more on the end result of what are we trying to provide with our education, and then what are we going to do to give it to them, and how are we going to provide them with it? As a thought, I was speaking to my brother in Texas, and we were talking about this idea of schools, because we both had very different schooling. He's somebody who in fourth grade, like his teacher said there's no hope for him with anything math, mathematically inclined. And he was flunking math. And now a number of years later, he's managing multi-millions of dollars like on a daily basis. So you're going to tell me the kid who couldn't do math, clearly there was something else missing.
Right.
But we were talking about, what is education, at least in our culture? Because again, we send people out to start communities. Well, not everybody who's going through the Chabad system is going to become a rabbi. And up until recently, there was a very big push that either you were a rabbi, an emissary, or you were funding the rabbis. And if you weren't in line with that path, then you were considered like off the path. And it was something you looked down upon. And what he and I were talking about was this idea, and it was really more of like, he worded it well. Our goal should be that no matter what path our students choose in the long run, they should, no matter where they are, they should still have those values that we instilled in them, to say, like, if they're out in the middle of, they're completely not religious, they're in the middle of Timbuktu, and they meet a fellow Jew who's not religious and wants to know what the prayer for the day is, that person will tell them what that prayer is, because they remember that when they were going through school, that was something that was important. Like, they're instilling values in them. And I think that's just in general, that's where education needs to go.
Yeah.
Just focusing on the values and the purpose behind it all.
I like the fact that, I'm sorry for your brother for being, labeled. Labeling is such a thing, unfortunate thing, in my opinion, in schools. I'm interested to hear, just to climb into some of the ideas and possibly the idea board behind you there. When you're talking about the schools beyond academics, what are some of the things that you're thinking about doing with this school that are, not math, science, English, whatnot? Like, what are you thinking there? Very interesting.
It's a very good question, and probably the biggest thing I've been trying to figure out, because in a way it's very easy to say academically these are our goals.
Right. But
on a character development level, how do you say that these are the goals? Well, every child is different. Every child has different character traits that they need to develop. Can you put in place a curriculum? Probably not for character development. So some of the basic things that you could do: budgeting, finances, mental health is a big one that people are talking a lot about. How to identify when there's an issue. I'm one of the people that I'm working with now as a coaching client and coaching partner, really. They're developing a program on rewriting negative scripts. I think that's extremely important. How many students go through? I mean, my students that, oh my gosh, I got an 80. My mother's going to kill me. And like, why is an 80 a bad thing? Like, I'm sorry, you tried. You put your effort into it. That is amazing. Focusing on things like that, building their self-esteem. Now, a lot of that, it's not like it's a curriculum. Okay, kids, open up to page 52 and we're going to learn about something. Like, no, that's not how it works.
Right.
So that's where, the Jewish guide to education is this book over here called The Principles of Education and Guidance. And the very first thing he says is that as a teacher, you need to make sure you got your head on straight. Like, are you in it for the right reasons, and are you really qualified? Because if you're not, then, get out of Dodge.
Right.
I mean, he doesn't say that, but you get the point. So I think when we as teachers and administrators are in a place where we're constantly checking ourselves, am I on the right path? Am I doing the right thing? Am I giving it all? How do I change? How do I adapt? How do I develop? Then we can look at the students and say, okay, how can I help them? So I think it really has to work top down. At the very beginning, every principal, every administrator, everybody in the school has to have the same vision. They have to know where they're going with this. That's extremely important. Now, how are we going to achieve that vision? As a principal, who are you checking with to make sure you're doing the right thing? Every person should have a coach,
right,
or a mentor, or somebody that is keeping them on track. We get very involved in the business of education, and we forget the personality behind it.
Right.
So I think from the top down, administration needs to make sure that they're in check, make sure they have the people they're going to, their mentors, their coaches, their guides. I would love to get a life coach in every school. Like, I mean, I recently heard about a financial planning firm, and my financial planner was telling me how every week he has a check-in with his life coach that is provided by the company. And it's an hour session where they don't talk about business, they talk about life. So principals, administration, teachers need to have somebody that they can go to, not first of all for education. Are you doing the right thing? Then how is your life going on?
Yeah.
You know, last year we had a teacher who he unfortunately was going through a very hard time. He had just lost his father to cancer, and it was coming out in his teaching. He was a lot louder and a lot more vocal in a negative way towards his students. I'm not justifying it, because it's not justified. He kept getting flack for it from the administration. Now, at the same time, my father had just been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and he was expected to die any day. And thank God, 2.5 years later, he's still doing very well. Okay, so maybe this is 2 years ago that this happened. But I related to him. I understood that there are stresses that happen in your regular life that affect your professional life. So where are the checks and balances there? How do we know that our teachers are doing well? Then from there, again, working down. So getting our administration mentors, coaches, guides to make sure they're doing the right thing. Getting them life coaches, people that they can speak to about life. Taking care of, supporting the teacher in their life. Financially, are they good? Teachers aren't highly paid at all, unfortunately. So what else, what other benefit, what other help can we provide them with? Then when you bring it down to the student level, again, some of those very same things. My school now, all the students have like therapists that work on, OT, PT, speech, all these different things. They have official counselors, but who's there to pull a student aside and just say, hey, how's your day going?
Right.
Do you want a cake? Do you want a candy? Do you want a chocolate? Just make them feel like a human. So again, to me, I don't have anything solid. Like I can lay out this plan for you and say X, Y, and Z, A, B, C. It's more of, here are some ideas and let's get them on paper. So that's the thing with me, is like, I'm a team player. I need to work with other people. So bouncing ideas off of people and then creating a solid plan of action. I think it's possible.
Yeah, I hear that.
There are a number of people who are doing stepping towards there. And it's about coming together and providing it together.
I hear that. I mean, especially, and I'm so glad you brought up administration, right? Like, because it is so, like right now, the decisions that are having to be made, and, there's no real training for what has happened, over the past year. And that is something that I feel as well is something, like you said, accountability coaches and / just like you said, life coaches. I think that's brilliant. That's a great thing. So I have to ask you, if you had an educator coming in to the field right now, and there's no doubt in my mind, it's inevitable you're going to be a school leader, because I can just sense the passion and I know it's going to happen. What word or words of advice do you give to that educator coming in to the field right now? That's
a good one. And I've spoken to many new educators. There's a guy in my school. I don't know why he chose our school to be his first year teaching, but he picked a rough school and he picked a rough year to start off with. I actually just checked in with him today. I said, hey, are you continuing education? He's like, I don't know. It's a big decision. I'm like, yeah, it is. But I spent a lot of time speaking to him, especially at the beginning of the year. The first year is the worst. It always is. You can't base your entire career off of your first year. So don't take it personally. Like when these students act out, even in a gen ed classroom, don't take it personally. When your administrator says something horrible or makes you feel like garbage, don't take it personally. Some people don't know how to lead, and they're leaders, unfortunately. So at the end of the day, you have to think to yourself, am I doing everything that I can to make sure that, my students are getting what they need? And then check, well, is there anything else I can do? Great. If there is, do it. If not, don't worry about it. But I think the biggest thing that causes burnout in teachers, especially like first year teachers or first or second year teachers, is they take things very personally. They take it a lot to heart. And they don't give themselves enough credit just for surviving the day. Like surviving the day is a huge part of education. It's one of those jobs where you're never really going to fully know the impact that you've had unless somebody says something.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, the chances of that happening, next to nil. Like you hope to be that type of educator where somebody does come to you 20 years later and tells you, oh my gosh, I completely changed my life because of you. Like, yes, that is every educator's goal and dream and the thing that they beg and pray and hope for. How often does that happen, unfortunately? Right. So I think the biggest thing for new educators is again, don't take it personally. Give it your all. If things don't work out 100%, it's not your fault, or don't take it personally. And I think this is key because a lot of people feel that when they finish getting the degree and they finish their training and everything like that, their education ends. And this kind of comes back to the idea of linear versus cyclical. Mm-hmm. I think somebody commented on that post and they said it's more of a spiral. And I love that because in a way, like it's not linear, but it doesn't come full circle. It more like it spirals and then goes up and up. Your education is never done. As an educator, it is your responsibility to make sure you're constantly educating yourself, whether that's through official ways like getting the next degree or just reaching out to educators who have been doing it longer than you or better than you, and finding out from them, like, how do I do? Get your own mentor, get your own coach. If your school isn't providing you with one, find one. There are so many people out there that would be happy to share with you what they're doing. And it is your responsibility to do that, to continue your education. How do I become a better educator? And if you can't do that, then I hate to be harsh, but if you can't do it, don't go into education.
Absolutely,
because it's you're holding people's lives in your hand. Like you have the power to make or break a child.
Yeah.
And I've seen it too many times, unfortunately, with poor educators who just they don't realize the damage they're doing. I've experienced some of them on my own. I think we all have. We all have that teacher that made us say, wait, what? But don't be that teacher. Right. Be the one who makes them say, wait, what? So yeah, I think that if I could give any advice, that's what it would be.
That's wonderful advice. I want to make sure people know where to find you. How can people connect with you? And you do some consulting. Obviously, from what the freebies you're throwing out here is wonderful. And where can people find you?
I do have a website, bsdcoaching.com. They can definitely catch me there. They can send me a message through that platform. I am on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/in/Boruch DuBrow, I believe. I think Baruch with an A, maybe. I am on Instagram as Rabbi_Baruch. I'm on Facebook. They can have my email, coachingbsd@gmail.com, or they can have my phone number and reach out to me through text or WhatsApp or what's the latest one? Telegram.
There's so
many of those. Yeah, there's so many, really. Any of those ways. I don't know if you have a way of putting up the phone number somewhere, but they're more than welcome to reach out to me. Mm-hmm. The only thing I ask is the reason why I give out my phone number is not to be spammed or scammed, but specifically for people to reach out. Like I'm not going to charge somebody if they just want to have a quick conversation or they want to shoot a text. Like I am putting my information out there for it to be utilized. Yeah. So please utilize it.
Absolutely. I'll put all that underneath in the podcast on the YouTube channel. Baruch, thank you so much for being with us today on Disrupt Education, man. It's a pleasure. I learned a lot, and I know that our listeners did too.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. I really enjoyed this conversation and looking forward to many more.
Excellent. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you next time on Disrupt Education.